They didn't invite me to my brother's graduation, so I left them out of my awards ceremony and watched their reactions go viral. Hi Reddit, my name is Natalie, I'm 23, and a few months ago something happened that changed everything for me. I'm still trying to make sense of it all. It started as just another example of how I was always treated like an afterthought in my own family, but it ended with my name in the news, my parents in shock, and me finally feeling seen for the first time in my life. The whole thing started when my younger brother, Ryan, was about to graduate from high school. He's 19 and honestly, he's always been the golden child. Straight A's, varsity athlete, always smiling, always charming. People love him. My parents practically worship him. And me? I was the quiet one. I liked reading, writing, volunteering, playing music. I was never the loudest or the flashiest, but I worked hard. I achieved things. They just never seemed to matter much at home. When Ryan's graduation party was being planned, I noticed everyone in the family group chat talking about it. Decorations, food, music, even a dance floor in the backyard. But no one messaged me. Not a single word. At first, I thought maybe they forgot. Maybe someone would reach out later. But they never did. Not even a simple, "Can you bring drinks?" So I finally went to my dad and asked him what was going on. I still remember how he crossed his arms and looked at me like I was being difficult. Then he said something I'll never forget. "We didn't want you stealing his moment. You always make things about yourself." I was so shocked I couldn't even speak for a second. Steal his moment? I've never had a moment to steal. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just looked at him and said quietly, "Then don't expect an invite to mine." He rolled his eyes and walked away like it was nothing. But for me, it was everything. Because what he didn't know was that I had been working on something big, and they were about to find out about it the hard way. For months, I had been quietly working on my future. While everyone was busy planning Ryan's big day, I was sending out applications to grad schools, building my writing portfolio, and putting everything I had into a huge opportunity one had my eyes on. I had also been accepted into a competitive summer writing residency at a state university, a program that partnered with major media outlets. And just 1 month after Ryan's graduation party, the one I wasn't welcome at, I got an email that changed everything. I was selected as one of just 3 students in the entire state to win a prestigious fellowship. It came with a $10,000 grant, national exposure, and an award that was being named after a late, respected local author. I was the first ever winner. Not only that, I was also asked to give the keynote speech at the award ceremony. And as if that wasn't enough, the program offered to throw a graduation-style celebration for me. A real event, with a stage, a banner, balloons, photographers, and everything I had once wished my family would do for me. They let me invite 20 guests. I knew exactly who to pick. I invited my best friend, Jules, who had been my rock through everything. I invited 2 of my former teachers who had always believed in me even when I didn't. I invited my old piano teacher from middle school, the one who used to tell me that my quietness was a strength, not a weakness. And I invited my cousin Jenny, the only family member who had never made me feel small. You know who I didn't invite? My parents. Or Ryan. Not out of revenge. Not to be cruel. But because they didn't deserve to be there. They had made it clear that my wins weren't worth celebrating. So, I celebrated without them. That day was one of the best days of my life. I stood on a stage under a banner that said, "Congratulations, Natalie," and I gave a speech about finding your voice even when no one wants to hear it. I held my certificate in one hand and shook hands with a state senator with the other. And I finally felt like I belonged somewhere. After the ceremony, Jenny took a photo of me under the banner, standing tall, smiling, finally seen, and she posted it on Instagram. The caption was simple, but it hit hard. "She's always been brilliant. Took the world a while to notice." That post went semi-viral in our small town. And that's when everything started to unravel. The local news picked it up. There were photos in the paper. Headlines that read, "Local girl wins global award." And that's how my parents found out. Not from me. From the internet. My mom collapsed in tears when she saw the article. My dad stood frozen, repeating, "Why would she leave us out? We're her parents." But the real question was, why did they leave me out first? The day after the news broke, my phone blew up. Not from my parents or Ryan, but from people I hadn't heard from in years. Old classmates messaged me. Distant family members sent congratulations. Even a few of my parents' friends reached out saying how proud they were of me. But from my own family? Silence. Complete, heavy silence. Until the next morning, when I got a message from my mom. Just 3 words. "How could you?" I stared at it for a long time, my heart beating fast, not from guilt, but from the weight of everything that had come before. I finally replied, "Exactly the question I asked when you left me off the invite list." She never responded. I think that's when I knew this wasn't over. The sadness would turn into something else, shame, maybe even anger. And sure enough, a few days later, the blame started. 3 days after the story went live, I was sitting on the steps outside my dorm with an iced coffee in my hand, enjoying a quiet morning when my phone rang. My dad's name appeared on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, my mom called. I ignored it too. Then Ryan. That one surprised me. I paused, took a deep breath, and answered. He didn't even say hello. He just jumped straight in with, "What the hell is your problem?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" He went on, "You really had to make some stupid speech about growing up with no support? You embarrassed all of us." There it was. Not congratulations. Not "I'm proud of you." Just pure defensiveness. In the background, I could hear my dad's voice feeding him lines. Someone must have sent them a clip of my speech, because clearly, that's what had set them off. But I hadn't said anything cruel or outrageous. Just the truth. I talked about how quiet kids often get overlooked, how growing up in a family that prioritizes perfection over progress can be hard, how sometimes you have to build your own stage when no one ever invites you to theirs. I didn't use names. I didn't throw anyone under the bus. I just spoke from my heart. But the truth hurt them more than lies ever could. Ryan called me a narcissist. Said I was always playing the victim. I let out a bitter laugh. Funny coming from the guy who had a whole backyard party while I was told not to show up. There was a long pause. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "You think you're better than us now? You're just a fluke. You used our name to get sympathy." That's when I realized what this was really about. They weren't just hurt. They were embarrassed. People were talking. Neighbors were asking questions. My grandmother had called them and said, "Why weren't you at the ceremony?" And when they told her they weren't invited, she shot back with, "Well, you didn't invite her either." Their perfect image had cracked. And rather than reflect on why, they needed someone to blame. That's when the story began to shift. I was no longer the quiet daughter they ignored. I was now the ungrateful one. The one who humiliated her family for attention. The one who aired dirty laundry for a scholarship, as if the years of being left out, talked over, and dismissed didn't happen. But here's the thing, while they were busy painting me as the villain, something beautiful happened. People started reaching out, kids I went to school with, friends of friends, even distant cousins who'd always stayed quiet. They said, "I saw your speech. That was me too. I've felt that way my whole life." Some told me they'd never heard anyone say out loud what they'd always carried inside. It hit me then. Maybe I was never the black sheep. Maybe I was just the only one willing to stop pretending I was white wool. And still, deep down, I knew my parents wouldn't let it go. I knew they were planning something. A way to take back control, to restore the image they were so desperate to maintain. A few weeks later, I got an invitation in the mail. Not from my parents, but from my cousin Lily, one of the few relatives who'd actually reached out after my speech went viral. She was getting married in the fall, and she wanted me there. Her note was handwritten, and at the bottom, she added, "Thank you for saying what I was always too scared to." I didn't hesitate. I RSVP'd yes. I booked a decent hotel, bought a nice dress, and told myself I would go for Lily, not for anyone else. But I also knew, somewhere deep inside, that my parents would be there. That Ryan would be there. that maybe, just maybe, they'd try to rewrite what happened. And I was right. The day of the wedding, I walked into the venue a little early. I helped Lily with a few last-minute things, and she hugged me so tightly I thought I might cry. "You belong here," she whispered. That simple sentence meant more than any speech or award. But the moment I stepped into the reception hall later, I felt the tension in the air. My parents were at a table near the front, surrounded by other relatives. Ryan was beside them, his fiancée clinging to his arm like some sort of trophy. When my mom saw me, her smile was tight. My dad gave me a nod. No one spoke. But I knew something was brewing. They weren't just going to let me exist in that room, without a fight for control. Halfway through dinner, the DJ announced that a few guests had requested to give short toasts before the dancing began. I was mid-sip of my drink when I heard my mother's voice through the microphone. I froze. She smiled that same practice smile I'd grown up with, the one that looked perfect but felt empty. "Family," she began, "isn't just blood. It's the people who stick with you through every storm, every challenge, every success." I knew what she was doing, reframing the narrative. "We've had a lot of noise in our family lately," she continued, glancing at me. "But I believe in love, and I believe in unity." I looked down at my plate, my fingers clenching around my fork. My father took the mic next. "Raising kids isn't easy, but we do our best. And sometimes, our kids don't see the sacrifices we make until they're older." I heard a few guests murmur in agreement. That's when Ryan stepped up. "I just want to say, I'm proud to be part of a family that knows when to forgive, when to move on, and when to protect its own." I could feel eyes turning toward me. A chill crawled up my spine. That wasn't a toast. That was a targeted speech, a polished, passive-aggressive attempt to paint me as the one who'd torn the family apart. The room fell silent. So, I stood up. I didn't plan to. I didn't even know what I'd say. But my legs moved before my brain caught up. I walked toward the DJ, asked for the mic, and faced the room. My voice was calm, steady. "Since we're speaking about family," I began, "let me just say this. Sometimes, the people who share your DNA are the ones who will watch you drown from the shore, then get mad that you learned to swim without them." Gasps echoed. I continued. "I wasn't going to say anything. I came here for Lily. But when the people who've hurt you publicly pretend they're victims, sometimes silence feels like betrayal." I paused, looked straight at my parents. "You didn't raise me. You decorated me for appearances. You celebrated my brother and forgot I was even in the room. You didn't come to my ceremony because you were never invited, but only because you forgot to invite me first. All I ever wanted was to be seen. Not as perfect, just as present." And then I looked around the room. So for anyone else here who grew up feeling like a background character in their own family story, you're not alone. And you don't have to stay silent to keep the peace that was never made for you. I handed the mic back. The room was still. Not a word. Until Lily, in her beautiful white dress, stood up and clapped. One by one, a few others followed. My parents didn't. Ryan didn't. But for the first time in my life, I didn't care. I didn't need their approval. I had my truth. And it was louder than any of their polished lies. After that night at the wedding, everything changed, but not in the way my parents probably hoped. The video of my response, filmed quietly by one of Lily's friends, went viral again. People saw through the polished toasts of my parents and Ryan. They saw the calm in my voice, the fire in my eyes, and the quiet strength it took to say what I said while surrounded by the people who tried to rewrite my story. My inbox overflowed with messages from strangers thanking me, telling me they'd felt invisible in their own families too. I wasn't alone anymore, and that meant everything. My parents? They tried damage control. A few days later, I got an email from my mother.
"No epaledi."
Just a cold paragraph about regret that things had become so public, and a suggestion that I should come home so we can talk like adults. I never replied, because what they really meant was, let us silence you in private so you can keep protecting us in public. But that era was over. I wasn't their silent daughter anymore. I wasn't the one who'd sit at the kids' table while they toasted my brother's every average achievement as if it were gold. Ryan tried too, a half-hearted message that said, "We're family no matter what." I laughed. Because family doesn't stand quiet when you're being erased. Family doesn't invite you to roast you. Family doesn't skip your graduation, then blame you for the absence. His wedding? I didn't go. I was invited, of course, probably because they knew it would look bad if I wasn't. But I politely declined. I spent that weekend on a solo trip, hiking in the mountains, breathing in clean air, and letting go of the last lingering weight they'd left on my shoulders. Years from now, maybe they'll tell a version of the story where I'm the one who cut ties. Maybe they'll say I was ungrateful, that I let success get to my head, that I forgot my roots. Let them. I don't need to argue with people who only remember their version of events. I didn't burn the bridge. I just watched them light the match, then blamed me for the smoke. And I walked away with my integrity, my voice, and a future that no longer required their permission to shine. Because here's the thing they never understood. I was never asking for a pedestal. I was just asking for a place, a seat, a moment of being seen. And when they couldn't give that to me, I learned to build a table of my own, one with room for people who never needed me to shrink to make them feel tall. So no, I don't miss them. I don't regret the speech. I don't regret leaving the gifts in my car that Christmas morning. I don't regret making them look in the mirror. And if they ever find the courage to apologize, truly, not just publicly, maybe I'll listen. But until then, I'll keep walking forward. Not as their daughter, but as the woman I became in spite of them. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or found the courage to speak your truth, hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. You deserve to be seen.